Officially opening my luxury homestay in Matakana. The reward after so much hard work. Time to finally live like a boss. Champagne caught the light in the photo under it, her glass raised toward the camera, and behind her shoulder, blurred at the edge of the frame, sat the one door on this earth nobody but me had ever managed to open. $130,000 of my own two hands, and she'd tagged 4,000 followers in the caption underneath. I put the phone face down on the workbench and didn't pick it up again for a long time. The workshop smelled the way it always did on a Friday afternoon, Remo oil and fresh sawdust, a faint diesel note from the generator out back. I'd been oiling a set of drawer runners when the notification came through, and I made myself finish the job before I let my hands shake. 40 strokes with the rag, working the oil into the grain until it went the color of dark honey. My old man taught me that, finish what's in your hands before you deal with what's in your head. He'd been dead 9 years and I still heard him every time I picked up a chisel. I'm Lincoln. 34. I build things that are meant to outlast the people who commission them, which is a strange thing to be proud of when you think about it too hard. The swandry hanging by the door had a rip in the left elbow I kept meaning to patch. Gemma used to say it made me look like I couldn't afford new clothes, which wasn't true. I could afford whatever I wanted, I just didn't see the point in throwing out something that still worked. That was the whole disagreement between us, if you boiled 3 years down to one sentence. She thought unworn things were wasted. I thought worn things were proven. We'd been done for 6 months. Long enough that I'd stopped flinching when her name came up on my phone, though tonight proved that was a lie I'd been telling myself. I remember the last real fight clearly, because it was about money, like most of them were near the end. She'd racked up $4,200 on a credit card buying furniture for a flat we hadn't even signed the lease on yet, convinced the landlord was going to say yes. He didn't. I paid it off anyway, transferred it in one go at 11 at night just to stop the crying on the other end of the phone, and she'd kissed me and called me her rock, and somewhere underneath that kiss I understood she'd already worked out that quiet men who pay quietly don't ever really say no. I told myself I was patient. She told her friends I was passive. Looking back, I think we were both right, and that's the part that used to keep me up, not that she was cruel, but that my own silence had built the road she walked down. The tiny house was the one thing I never let her touch. I started it the winter after we got together, out on a rented block of land 20 minutes past the edge of Auckland, where a mate from the trade let me use a corner of paddock for next to nothing. Weekends, evenings after the workshop closed, sometimes whole days when a job fell through and I needed my hands busy so my head would stay quiet. Douglas fir frame, cedar cladding I'd sourced through a bloke in Whangarei who was clearing his family's land. The door was Remu, old growth, salvaged from a demolished woolshed near Matamata, a single slab, no joins, the kind of timber you don't see for sale anymore because nobody's cutting trees like that anymore. I built a locking mechanism into that door myself. A recessed latch system, custom, no standard lock would fit the housing I'd shaped for it. The only key was a small carved cowrie anchor I kept on a leather cord, usually in my jacket pocket, sometimes just sitting on the windowsill above my kitchen sink where I could see it while I did the dishes. It wasn't decorative. It was the only thing on earth that opened that door. I'd meant the tiny house to be an answer to something, though I never said what, not even to myself. Some nights out there with the radio on low and the smell of San Remo still hanging in the air, I let myself imagine a life that was smaller and quieter than the one Gemma wanted for us. A life with just enough. I don't think she ever understood that building it was the point, not selling it, not renting it out, not turning it into an asset. It was mine the way a diary is yours. After we split, I left it where it was, on the rented block, half-finished odds and ends still stacked under a tarp beside it, offcuts, a spare hinge set, a tin of the same oil I'd just used on the drawer runners. I hadn't been out to check on it in 3 weeks. Work had been heavy, 2 kitchen fit-outs back to back, and there'd been no reason to rush. Nobody else had a key. Nobody else needed one. I sat with that thought a long time on Friday evening, the phone still face down on the bench, until it stopped being a thought and became a decision. I drove out there before the light went. The block sits behind a row of macrocarpa windbreaks, the kind that turn gold green when the evening sun comes in low, and normally the drive-out settles something in me, paddock, then gravel, then the particular quiet you only get 20 minutes from a motorway. That evening none of it registered. I had the window down and I could smell rain coming, that mineral smell off wet clay before the first drops land, and underneath it, faint, diesel exhaust that didn't belong out there. The block was empty. Not tidied up empty. Gone empty. Where the tiny house had sat for 2 years there was a rectangle of yellowed, flattened grass, and cut into the mud at the gate, 2 deep parallel gouges, tire tracks, heavy ones, the kind left by a truck built to carry a full house on a trailer, not a Uda. The tracks led out toward the road and didn't come back. I stood there a long moment with the wind picking up off the paddock, cold enough now that I could see my own breath, and I did not feel the anger yet. What I felt first was colder than that, a kind of arithmetic. 2 years. Every weekend. The remador. The oil I'd just used 40 strokes of not 2 hours ago, sitting on a bench a 20-minute drive from a house that no longer existed on this block. The landowner, a retired dairy farmer named Pete Dunwoody, came out when he heard my Uda in the gateway, wiping his hands on a rag, looking more confused than guilty. "Your missus came through Wednesday," he said. "Had the paperwork and everything. Property settlement, she called it. Had your signature on it and all, so I let the transport blokes through the gate. Big low loader. Didn't think much of it, figured you two'd sorted it between yourselves." "She's not my missus," I said. "Hasn't been for 6 months." Pete's face did something complicated. "Well, she had a copy of something. Signed. I've still got it in the house if you want to see it." I didn't ask him to fetch it yet. I stood in the gateway with the wind coming up cold off the paddock and I let the real question settle into me, the one that wouldn't leave for the rest of that night. She hadn't just taken the house. She'd walked in with paper. Forged, had to be. I'd signed nothing, agreed to nothing, hadn't spoken to her in 6 weeks. And instead of hiding what she'd done, she'd put it on Instagram with her name tagged and her friends commenting champagne emojis underneath. You don't fake a signature and then broadcast the theft to 4,000 followers unless some part of you is certain nobody's going to check. I didn't call her. I didn't call anyone. I put my hand into my jacket pocket, the way I do without thinking when I need to steady myself, and found a small carved cowrie anchor sitting there where it always sat, the leather cord soft from years against my palm. The only key. Still in my pocket. Which meant that wherever that low loader had taken my house, the door across those long 2 years of work was locked, and whoever unloaded it on the other end was going to find they own a house they couldn't get into. That thought should have felt like something. Instead it felt like the first calm thing I'd had all evening, a single, solid fact in a night that had stopped making sense. I thanked Pete, told him I'd be in touch, and drove home with the tire tracks still cut into my mind clearer than the road in front of me. Somewhere between the macrocarpas and the motorway on-ramp, the cold arithmetic turned into something with a shape. I wasn't going to ring her and shout. I wasn't going to drive to Matakana and make a scene at her launch. I was going to go home and pull every receipt, every design drawing, every insurance document I had for that house out of the folder in my filing cabinet, and lay them out on the kitchen table like a man taking measurements before he cuts. By 10 that night the table was covered. Timber invoices from the yard in Wangari, dated across 2 winters. The insurance schedule I'd taken out the year before, listing the bill at $125,000, since gone up in value with the market. Photographs I'd taken myself, every stage, because that's what you do when you're proud of something, the frame going up, the cedar cladding half finished, the remador before I hung it, laid flat across 2 sawhorses with my hand resting on the grain for stale. I hadn't planned on needing proof I'd built my own life. Turned out I'd been building the case for it the whole time without knowing. My phone buzzed at 11. Gemma. I let it ring out. It rang again straight after, and I picked it up only because the alternative was listening to it go a 3rd time. Lincoln. Her voice had the wet, close sound of someone who'd been crying, or wanted to sound like they had. Please don't be like this. Like what, Gemma? I know you're upset. I know how it looks. But you have to let me explain properly, not over the phone. Just, come to Matakana, come and see what I've done with it, and you'll understand. Understand what? That you forged my signature and had my house trucked off a paddock while I wasn't there? A pause, then the crying came back, louder. It's not, I didn't forge anything, you were never going to use it, Lincoln. You never even lived in it. It just sat there. 2 years of your life sitting in a paddock going to waste, and I thought, someone should actually get something out of it, so you stole it. Don't say it like that. Her voice cracked properly now, a sound I recognized from a dozen fights over 3 years, the one that used to end with me apologizing for things I hadn't done. You have no idea what the last 6 months have been like for me. I had nothing when we split. Nothing, Lincoln. You kept the workshop, the tools, everything that actually makes money, and I walked away with a suitcase. Do you know what that does to a person? You walked away with a suitcase because you chose to leave. Because you never once fought for us. Her voice spiked, then dropped, controlled again, softer, almost pleading. Look, I'm not trying to hurt you. I just need this. One thing. You've got the workshop, you'll build another one, you always do, that's what you're like, you just build and never actually live in anything you make. I need this to actually go somewhere with my life. Please. Just let me have it. Don't make this ugly. I sat with the phone against my ear and looked at the photograph on the table in front of me, my own hand flat against the remodoor, taken the day I'd finished sanding it. Some part of me, old and worn smooth from 3 years of doing exactly this, wanted to say fine, keep it, I'll build another one, it's easier than the fight. I could feel the shape of that surrender in my chest, familiar as an old shirt. It would have been so easy. It had always been easy. No, I said. Lincoln, no, Gemma. The line went quiet except for her breathing, uneven, and then it went dead. She'd hung up on me, which told me more than anything she'd said, she hadn't expected the word no to actually land. In 3 years I wasn't sure I'd ever said it to her and made it stick. I didn't sleep much. I lay in the dark turning the carry anchor over between 2 fingers, the way I did when my head wouldn't settle, tracing the grain with my thumb until the shape of it was more habit than object. The police station on Monday morning smelled like instant coffee and the particular disinfectant they use on public counters. I'd brought a document folder thick enough that the detective behind the counter raised an eyebrow before I'd said a word. Property dispute? He asked, flipping through the first few pages. Detective Senior Sergeant Rewiri Tain, according to the little plate clipped to his shirt. 40s, tired around the eyes in a way that suggested he'd already had this exact conversation twice that morning with 2 other people. It's theft, I said. And forgery. Ex-partner situation? Yes. He set the folder down with the flat, patient look of a man who'd heard those 2 facts in that order 1,000 times and knew exactly which drawer to file it in. Right. So, you 2 split up, there's a shared asset, she's taken it, you're saying without your agreement. Mate, I'll be honest, 90% of the time this comes down to a civil matter. Relationship Property Act stuff. You'd be looking at the family court, not us. There's no shared asset. It's my house. I built it before we split, on land I rented in my name, with my money, my labor. She was never on the title because there was no title. I own the trailer, I own the land lease, I hold the only key. And she produced paperwork with my signature on it to get the transport company through the gate. I never signed anything. Tain's expression didn't change much, but he pulled the folder back toward himself and started reading properly this time, slower. Talk me through the timeline. I did. The Instagram post. The drive out to the block. Pete Dunwoody and the tire tracks. The document Pete said Gemma had shown him, which I hadn't seen yet but which I now watched Tain request a copy of, calling the transport company directly from his desk phone while I sat there. The call took 11 minutes. I counted them, the way I count the strokes on a rag when I'm oiling timber, because it gave my hands something to do that wasn't clenching. When he hung up, his face had changed. They emailed it through, he said, turning his monitor so I could see. It's titled Property Settlement and Emotional Damages Agreement. Your name's on the signature line. I looked at it for a long moment. The signature wasn't even close. Whoever had signed my name had never watched me write it. The L looped the wrong way, and I don't loop the L. That's not my signature. No, Tane agreed slowly. It's not a very good forgery, if I'm honest. But it's dated, and it's got a JP stamp on it, or something meant to look like one. He glanced back up at me. You said your house has a custom lock. Something nobody else can open. I built the mechanism myself. There's one key. I took the carry anchor out of my jacket pocket and set it on the counter between us, the leather cord pulling beside it. This is it. He looked at it a long moment, then back at the folder, then at me, and something in his posture straightened, the tired civil dispute posture gone, replaced by something more alert. Right, he said. This isn't a family court matter anymore. If that signature's forged and she's used it to obtain property by deception, we're looking at theft of a high-value item and using a forged document. That's criminal, not civil. I'll need to open a file properly. Can you leave the folder with me, get it copied? Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, Lincoln, once we open this, it's not something you can unopen. If she's got a defense lawyer with half a brain, they'll come at you hard about the relationship history, try to paint it as a breakup gone messy. You right with that? I thought about 6 months of silence, about $130,000 of my own hand sitting on a strip of land in Matakana with someone else's name attached to it in a caption. I thought about the L that loops the wrong way. I'm right with it. The call from the unknown number came through on Wednesday afternoon, while I had a router running and couldn't hear the first 2 rings over the noise. I caught it on the third, wiped my hands on my jeans, and answered without thinking, the way you do at a workshop when your head's still half on the job. Lincoln, mate. Des here. The voice was loud, easy, the kind of voice that assumes it's already won the conversation before it started. Gemma's partner. Thought it was time we had a chat, man to man. I don't know you. Nah, but I know plenty about you. Gemma's told me everything. A short laugh, not unkind exactly, worse than unkind, amused. Look, I get it, this whole thing's a bit of a blow to the ego. Tiny house, put your heart into it and all that, and now some other bloke's benefiting off it, yeah? I'd be spewing too. What do you want? Just to talk sense into you, honestly, before this gets messy for everyone. You've got police involved now, which, mate, come on. Over a house? Think about what that actually cost you, legal fees, time off work, and for what? Gemma's told me what 3 years with you was like. Constant walking on eggshells, being with someone who'd rather build a shed than actually show up for her. She gave you 3 years, man. 3 years of her life. That house is worth what, 130 grand? Call it even. Call it her cut for putting up with you. I stood in the workshop doorway with the router still humming behind me and felt something go very still and very cold in my chest, the stillness I recognize now as the thing that comes right before I stop being reasonable. That's not how any of this works. It's how it's gonna work if you've got any sense, Des said, and the easy tone thinned, just slightly, just enough that I heard what was underneath it. Because right now you've got a choice, yeah? You drop the police thing, let her keep the house, everyone moves on, nobody's life gets complicated. Or you keep pushing, and things come out about you that maybe you don't want coming out, about the relationship, about what you're actually like behind closed doors. People believe what they want to believe once it's out there, mate. Doesn't have to be true. Just has to be said. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. A pause, and I could hear, faintly, a door closing somewhere on his end, like he'd stepped outside to make the call in private. Be a man about it, Lincoln. Let her have the win. You'll build another one. Blokes like you always do. He hung up before I could answer. I stood there a long moment with the phone still against my ear, the dial tone flat and steady, and became aware, distantly, that I'd been recording the call the whole way through, a habit I'd picked up 2 days earlier without quite deciding to, an app sitting ready on my home screen since the moment I left the police station, because some instinct in me had already known there'd be a second call, and that whoever made it would say more than they meant to. I played it back once, sitting on the workbench with the router still running, and wrote down 2 things on the back of an invoice. That house is worth what, 130 grand? He'd known the exact figure. I'd never posted it anywhere, never told Gemma the current insurance valuation. The only place that number existed was in the schedule I'd handed to Detective Tane 4 days earlier. Which meant either Gemma had told him a number she also shouldn't have had, or somebody on that side of things had seen my paperwork before I had a chance to lock it down. I didn't call Tane that night. I sat with the invoice and the 2 lines I'd written, and underneath the cold, still place in my chest, something else moved. Not anger exactly, closer to grief, the old useless kind, the kind that made me remember the version of myself that used to transfer $4,200 at 11 at night just to make the crying stop. That man would have folded by now. Would have told himself it wasn't worth the fight, that Des had a point buried somewhere under the threat, that maybe 3 years with him really had cost Gemma something he owed her for. I sat with that old shape of myself for a long time before I put it down. In the morning I drove the recording, on a USB stick, straight to the station. Tane listened to 11 minutes and 40 seconds of it without saying a word, headphones on, one finger tapping slow against the desk. When he took them off he didn't look surprised so much as satisfied, the way a man looks when a theory finally has the evidence to match it. He says the figure out loud, Tane said. 130 grand. That's not in anything public. That number only exists in the valuation you gave us. I know. We'll be looking at him too, then. Inducing the offense, may be party to the forgery itself, depending what we find when we pull his phone. He slid the folder shut. Grand opening Saturday, yeah. The Homestay? That's what she's been posting. Then here's what we're going to do. Saturday came in clear and cold, the kind of Matakana morning where the light off the harbor is sharp enough to make everything look freshly painted. I sat in the back of an unmarked car 2 streets from the property with Tane in the front passenger seat, watching a live feed of Gemma's Instagram stories on my phone, fairy lights strewn along the deck, a table of grazing boards, 6 or 7 of her friends in sundresses holding glasses up to the camera, and there, unmistakable, even reframed with a new set of steps and a coat of white paint disguising the cladding, my Remador. 2 guests booked in for tonight, Tane said, reading off his own screen. Confirmed by card payment 3 days ago. That's commercial gain from stolen property. Changes the charge sheet considerably. He glanced back at me. You holding up all right? I turned the carry anchor over once in my palm and didn't answer straight away. Yeah, I said eventually. I'm all right. We rolled in at 2:30, 2 patrol cars behind us, no sirens until the very last stretch of driveway, and by then it didn't matter, every head on that deck had already turned. Gemma was mid-sentence, glass raised, when the first patrol car came into view past the Pohutukawa at the gate. I watched her face do 3 things in about 4 seconds, confusion, then a flicker of something close to panic, then, and this was the part I'd remember longest, a kind of composed defiance sliding down over the top of it like a mask she'd rehearsed putting on. This is a private event, she called out, already walking toward the steps, glass still in hand. You can't just, Gemma Voss. Tane was out of the car now, unhurried. We need to speak to you about the property you're operating from. I own this property. Her voice carried, pitched for the crowd of friends now clustering at the deck rail, phones already coming up to film. I have paperwork. Settlement paperwork, signed by both of us. If this is about my ex being bitter, can I see it? She went inside and came back with a printed copy, handed it over with a kind of triumphant steadiness that told me, more than anything else that day, exactly how sure she'd been that it would never come to this. That nobody would ever check. That I would never check. I stepped out of the car then. I hadn't planned the timing of it. Tane hadn't told me to wait, hadn't told me to come forward, but something in me needed her to see my face at the exact moment the paper failed her, and I walked up the gravel with my hands in my jacket pockets, one fist loosely closed around the carry anchor, saying nothing. Gemma's eyes found mine over Tane's shoulder, and for just a second, 1 second, got almost before I registered it, something cracked in the composure. Then it sealed back over. "Oh, so you brought the cops now," she said, loud, playing to the deck. "Because that's easier than an actual conversation, right, Lincoln?" "That's so you." "Ms. Boss," Tane said, holding the printed page up, "this signature doesn't match any record we hold for Mr. Astley. Can you tell me who witnessed it being signed?" It was done through a solicitor. I don't have to explain the process to you." "Which solicitor?" The pause stretched a beat too long, and I watched 3 of the friends on the deck go very still, phones lowering slightly, the party atmosphere curdling in real time into something closer to a held breath. "I don't remember the name off the top of my head," Gemma said. "It was Dez's guy. He arranged it. I just signed where I was told. You just told me Mr. Astley signed it." Her mouth opened and nothing came out for a moment. In that gap, that small ugly gap, I finally understood, not from anything she said, but from the shape of her face trying to find the next lie, exactly why she'd done all of it in the open, why she'd posted the caption, tagged the friends, taken the bookings, put her name and her face right next to a crime instead of hiding it. She hadn't been hiding it because she'd never believed it needed hiding. 3 years of watching me pay off her debts without a fight, 6 months of silence after we split without so much as an angry text, had taught her something about me that felt, to her, like fact, that I didn't push back. That I absorbed things. That whatever she took, she'd get to keep, because making a scene, going to police, dragging it into daylight, that wasn't a thing the Lincoln she knew would ever actually do. She hadn't gambled on getting away with it. She'd been certain of it, the way you're certain the sun comes up, and certainty like that doesn't hide. "You didn't think I'd do anything," I said, quiet, mostly to myself, but she heard it. "Because you never have." It burst out of her, raw now, the composure gone entirely. 3 years, Lincoln. 3 years of you just taking whatever I gave you, never once standing up, never once saying this is mine and you can't have it, and I actually thought I was doing you a favor, giving you a reason to finally build something you'd never have to live in. That's not a favor. That's a robbery with a bow on it. It's a house she never even slept in." She was crying now, properly, not the performed kind from the phone call, something raw underneath it. "You built it for 2 years and you never once spent a night in it, Lincoln, not once, and you're standing here acting like I ripped your heart out over a shed. I know a way to settle who it belongs to," Tane said, cutting through it, level. "Can everyone step back from the entrance, please?" The deck had gone almost silent, the grazing board table abandoned, sundresses and phones all turned now toward the small Rima door at the top of the newly painted steps. Up close, in the flat afternoon light, I could see the gouges around the housing where somebody had tried to force it, deep pry marks radiating out from the lock plate, splinters lifted and never sanded back down, the kind of damage that comes from someone in a hurry with a crowbar and no idea what they were actually up against. "There's damage to the lock housing," Tane said, running a finger near it without touching. "Ms. Boss, can you explain that?" "I lost the key," Gemma said, too fast. "We had to get in somehow before the launch, so there was never a key to lose," I said. "There's one key. I've had it the entire time." I walked up the steps. Nobody stopped me. I took the carry anchor out of my pocket, unwound the leather cord from around my fingers, and fitted the small carved key into the housing I'd shaped myself 2 winters ago, in a workshop that smelled like Remo oil, on evenings when I hadn't yet worked out what I was really building or why. It turned smooth, despite the pry marks, despite everything. The recessed latch gave with a single clean, low sound, not dramatic, not loud, just the sound of a mechanism doing exactly what it was built to do, and the door swung inward on the same hinges I'd hung it on, the same weight in my hand it had always had. Nobody on that deck said anything for a moment. Then, from somewhere behind me, one of Gemma's friends said, quietly, To no one in particular, oh my God. Gemma didn't say anything at all. She was watching the door, and I understood, in the silence that followed, that some part of her had believed even now, right up until that click, that the story she'd told herself about me, passive, absorbing, never fighting back, was still somehow going to hold. Tane read her the caution while 2 constables did the rest, and it happened quietly, without struggle, Gemma's composure gone entirely now, replaced by a kind of stunned, silent crying that didn't perform for anyone. I looked around for Des somewhere in the crowd of stilled guests. I'd half expected him to step forward, loud, ready to talk his way through this the way he'd talked on the phone, but the gap by the gate where Uda had been parked earlier was empty, tire marks already dry in the gravel, and one of the friends was saying, disbelieving, did he seriously just leave, as Gemma turned, hands behind her back now, calling his name once into a driveway that didn't answer. I didn't feel the hall of triumph I might have expected. I felt tired, mostly, and something close to sad, standing in a doorway I'd built with my own hands while a woman I used to love was walked past me toward a patrol car, still saying my name, though not the way she used to say it. The charges took 3 months to work through. Forgery, theft of property over the value threshold, obtaining a benefit by deception. Des was picked up 11 days later, his phone full of exactly the messages Tane had expected. In the end, Gemma pleaded to a reduced set of charges, 9 months home detention, a conviction that would sit on her record for good, and a debt to the land lease company and her own lawyer that Pete Dunwoody told me, the one time I ran into him at the feed store, would probably take her years to climb out from under. I didn't go to the sentencing. I'd said everything I needed to say the moment the latch clicked open on that deck. I had the tiny house trucked back to Pete's paddock the following weekend. On a low loader I hired myself this time, with paperwork in my name that nobody would need to forge because nobody else's name belonged on it. Pete helped me guide it back onto the same flattened rectangle of grass, now bone green again after a winter of rain, and we stood a while afterward with 2 beers, not saying much, the way you don't need to with a man who already understands. It took me most of a Sunday to fix the door. I sanded back the pry marks first, slow passes with worn paper, working with the grain the way my old man taught me, until the gouges thinned to nothing and the wood underneath showed pale and new against the darker, weathered rimu around it. Then the oil, the same tin I'd used the Friday this whole thing started, half empty now, the same smell filling the small space of the house as the afternoon went gold outside the window. I worked it in with a clean rag, 40 strokes, then 40 more, until the wood took on that deep honeyed color again, until you'd have to know exactly where to look to find where it had ever been broken. When I was done I sat for a while on the top step with the door open behind me, the paddock quiet, a fantail working the grass near the tree lean, dipping and turning the way they do. I thought about a version of myself from 6 months earlier who would have let the caption stand, let the champagne photo stay up, told himself it wasn't worth the fight, and I didn't feel angry at that version of me anymore, just far away from him, the way you feel about a coat you used to wear that doesn't fit anymore. I went inside once the light started going, checked the shelves I'd built into the far wall, ran my hand once along the underside of the bench I'd never got around to finishing. Small jobs left for another weekend. No rush now. On my way out I stood in the doorway a moment, the cowrie anchor already back in my palm, cord looped once around 2 fingers the way it always sat. I fitted the key into the housing, the wood still faintly warm with Remo oil, the paddock gone quiet and blue in the last of the light, and turned it, one clean motion, the latch dropping home with the same low, certain click it always made, sealing the smell of the oil and the wood in behind me, and shutting out, for good, everything that had ever tried to force its way in. Some nights now I still drive out to Pete's place after the workshop closes, not because there's anything left to fix, just because the Uda knows the turn off the main road by itself and I let it take me there. I sit on the step with a beer going warm in my hand and I don't think about Gemma much anymore, not really. What I think about instead is the sound the latch made that afternoon on the deck, how small it was, how it didn't need to be anything more than what it was to do exactly what it had always been built to do. I still keep the cowrie anchor on the leather cord, still catch myself turning it over in my pocket during the quiet stretch of a job when my hands need something to do and my head's gone somewhere else. I noticed the other week that the grain's worn smoother on one side now, from 3 years of thumbs, and I like that better than I liked it new. Gemma used to say worn things were wasted. I've stopped arguing with people who aren't in the room to hear it. The door itself, you'd have to know where to look. Run ahead along the inside edge, low, near the hinge, and you can just feel where the old pry marks used to be, under the oil, under the new grain that grew back paler before it darkened to match the rest. I sanded again every few months, out of habit more than need, 40 strokes, then 40 more, the same rag I've had since before any of this happened, gone soft and dark with years of the same oil. Pete asked me once, standing by the paddock gate with his hands wrapped round a mug of tea, whether I ever thought about selling the place now that all the fuss had died down. I told him no. I told him I finally slept a night in it, the week after I got it back, first time in 2 years, lying there listening to rain start up on the cedar roof I'd cut myself, and it sounded exactly the way I'd always imagined it would, back when I was still just a bloke with a saw and no real plan for what he was building. I locked the door behind me that morning the same way I do every time now, key in, half turn, the click. Small sound. Mine.